Hi, today I want to show you how to set up your Nikon D7000 for the best video setting. You're probably thinking, Nikon D7000 for video? Are you sure? Yes, actually Nikon D7000 is a pretty good video camera if you know how to set it up properly. Let's get started. Alright, so here we have the Nikon D7000. You're probably wondering, this camera can do video that good? Oh yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can actually make this camera a good video camera for short films. Now, it is an APS-C sensor, so it's quite big. It's like the Super 35 sensor, so you can see that it's already having a good sensor built into the system, so you can emulate a pretty professional quality video. Now I'm going to use a kit lens, a 28 to 80 mils f3.5 to 5.6. I know this is not the best lens, but this is the lens that most people who have this camera could afford, and in fact it's a good starting out lens. Now you have the money, of course you want a fast lens, right? But we'll just stick with this for now, and most important in this video is that I want to show you the setup to make the best video recording. Now I'm assuming that you're going to be using it for like a studio setting. Now you can modify this further depending on what situation you're shooting your video on or at. So I'm going to switch over to the Nikon D7000 to show you the best setting. Alright? Okay, so here we have the Nikon D7000 camera. We're going to try to set it up to get the best setting for the video. The first thing you want to do is make sure you set it to manual autofocus, and everything manual as well. Okay, so you see the button over here, there. Make sure you click from autofocus to manual. So that's set to manual focus. The reason you want to do that is Nikon D7000 is great for photography in terms of its audio focus, but for video I don't think it's that great. And anyway, most of the short filmmaker they would like to have full control of the camera, so usually it's on manual focus anyway. So that's what I would advise you to do, set it to manual focus and manual setting. So make sure you press that button and switch to MF, manual focus. Now notice that the lens I'm using is the I guess you can call it a kit lens because it's not that expensive. This is a 28 to 80 mils f3.5 to 5.6. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I open to the widest aperture, which is f3.5 for this kit lens, and set it to 28 mils, which is usually the standard for filming. Right now, if you want to zoom in, of course, that's a different story. But it depends on the type of shot you're doing. But for, let's say, studio setting, I would say set it to 28 mils f3.5 is the optimal. Okay. Now you've noticed the setting here, here, and here. The aperture is f3.5 like I mentioned, but the like over here the shutter speed is 1/30th. Now normally you set it to 1/50th, but for studio setting it doesn't really matter because it's just a talking head, and if you set it to 1/30th versus 1/50th, there is not much of a big difference. Unless of course you're moving a lot, like you're moving your hand like this and all that, then it might be obvious. But when you're just talking, 1/30th is more than enough. And I mentioned this on my Sony a5000 as well, that if you set to 1/30th, you're pretty much bringing more light into the camera. Okay, so that's very important. We want less noise, more light. Especially you don't have that much light. Now I would advise you to have an optimal light anyway when you set up. But let's say you only have just minimal light, then the next best thing to do is to bring down the shutter speed to 1/30th. Okay, so it's fine. 1/30th versus 1/50th, not much of a difference when you're just talking like this. Okay, so do that. So 1/30th, f3.5, the widest aperture for this kit lens, and then of course the ISO here, you notice is 640. Make sure you set it to that. You can bring it up more to 800 if you want, but I don't think you should go beyond 800 ISO on this Nikon D7000. Now the reason for that is when you start to color grade, and I would advise you actually when you set up your camera set it right. Okay, make sure that you like the color on the camera, and if it's perfect, the lighting's all perfect, then I would say yeah, that's what you want to leave it at. And then when you do post, when you try to edit it and add more color to it, then you do a little bit of tweaking, and the ISO wouldn't matter as much. Okay, so this is why I said that, you know, we want to bring the ISO 640, and when we tweak it, if we have to stretch it a little bit, then it won't give us that much noise. If you set it to, let's say, 1600 ISO, and then you try to tweak it like color grade and all that, and you know, add more contrast on that, you'll see more noise for sure. So I would say the optimal ISO, especially for APS-C camera like the A5000 or the Nikon D7000, you know, yeah, I think that's a good ISO to start with. In fact, I would just leave it at ISO 640, and if you want to, go a little bit more to 800, but I'm going to set it to 640. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to set up the color balance. So here we have the white balance. We're going to do that. Now my light is around 27 to 2800 Kelvin, so that's what I'm setting it to, 2780 Kelvin. Okay, and then just like the Sony A5000 option that I did in the last video, notice that there is a color temperature grid, which is very good because now we can adjust the color that we want it. Now notice that I'm setting it very similar to my Sony A5000 I did in the last video. Now I'm not saying that this is the best option. You need to test this out yourself, but I do like the lighter pink blue grid on the fourth quadrant, and this will give you a more natural, I guess you could call it a beautiful tone into your skin. Let me just go back to that. There we go. Okay, so this fourth grid, B2M4, I think is a good choice to start with, especially your light color is 2700 Kelvin, so I think this is a very good for skin tone. Okay, again, you can change it around, you can move it around if you want to. If you like it more orangey, you might want to move to the upper grid here. Okay, but for me, I like the pink and blue type of color. It seems to have this beautiful look to it. Again, it's personal preference, but that's what I will set it at. Alright, the next thing is to set up the picture profile in Sony, but in Nikon it's called set picture control, and notice I set to standard. Okay, and now if you press the rotating button here, a knob, and you press to the right, you can have more options, and this is the option: sharpening, contrast, brightness, saturation, and hue. Okay, so notice how for sharpening, I don't want it to be too sharp. Oops, let's bring it back again. Okay, so standard, and then sharpening, I'll set it to, notice here I can bring it to 0, but I'm going to set it to number 2. Okay, not too sharp. And then for contrast, again, I don't want it too contrasty. I want it to be more less contrast, so I notice I'm moving it to negative, I guess you could call it in here -2. Okay, brightness, I made it a little bit more brighter, so plus. And then for saturation, I brought it all the way, notice all the way down to negative, to the lowest negative setting there, right there. Okay, and hue, I also set to negative as well. So I mean, again, you want to test this out to find out which one is the best setting for you, but you know, I want less sharp, less contrast, more bright, less saturation, less hue, and then I can maybe change that in post. Now make sure that the ISO is not too high. Okay, so 640 ISO is pretty good, and I think that's good enough for you to do a bit of a tweaking in your film or your video. Okay, so it's good enough for tweaking in your video, especially if you note that this camera, just like the A5000, the Sony A5000, the Nikon D7000, same thing, is an 8-bit 420 codec. So for filming, that's you know, okay, but you can't do too much color grading. So this is why you need to get the color and the lighting right on spot, and then maybe if you need to tweak it during post, you could do that as long as you have ISO low enough, but you have a lot of light coming in, and I think you'll find with the way it's set up. But definitely have it all set up in camera instead of waiting till post. Okay, I wouldn't advise you to, you know, wait till it's, you know, you finish filming and then you say, okay, I'm gonna adjust some of this color. It doesn't always work that way, especially when you have a camera that's only 8-bit 420. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's very important that you get everything right during filming, and then maybe do a little bit of tweaking at the end. Okay, so that's about it. I mean, that's quite simple, right? It's not that hard to fix. The other thing is, like I said, just make sure you set it to manual here, M, right? Single shot on the dial here. But other than that, everything is set up for filming. So 1/30th if you want more light. In studio setting, that's fine. f3.5 depending on the kit lens you have or the lens you have. This is the widest aperture, so I can bring more light. ISO 640. So make sure everything is set to manual and you'll be fine. Okay, like manual focus, and you're ready to go. That's about it. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to edit this image here in post. So we have everything set up properly. The f3.5 on this kit lens, 28 mils, very close to the camera, by the way. So even at 28 mils look like very close, right? ISO 640, and the shutter speed is 1/30th. Okay, so I'm gonna try to edit this in post and see what it looks like. So let's have a look at it. Okay, so here's the video that I'm gonna drag into the DaVinci Resolve 16 Studio. Now you can also use this DaVinci Resolve 16 Standard, which is free, so it'll work as well. I'm just gonna use my paid version. So okay, so what you need to do for this video, as you know, I'm pretty much happy with the way the color looks, although I want to give it more skin tone, like I want to give it more depth to the color of my skin, and bring more light into it, and that's about it. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So we're gonna click on the color wheel, and to do this, to make it more brighter, we're gonna swing this curve here over, there we go, to get it more brighter. So I'm gonna bring it about there. Again, you gotta look at your monitor to see which preferred look you like, and that's what I like. I like this pretty bright look to it. The next thing I want to do is, as you can see here, I want to add in more saturation, bring more color into this video. So let's do that. There we go. So you can see already it's getting pretty good. Wow, that looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna see if I can add more color boost to this skin. Okay, let's see. There we go. That looks not bad. Now it's a little bit orangey, so I like to add a bit of blue teal or green teal to this. So let's bring this color wheel, the offset, more. There we go. Again, it's all preference, depending on how you like to envision your look of your film. To me, I want a little bit of a pinky type of color to the skin. Let's see if I can emulate that. It's harder to tell with this smaller monitor, but as you can see, maybe that's pretty good. All right, looks pretty good. And maybe we'll bring up a bit of this curve. See what it looks like. Okay. Again, if you want more contrast, you can bring it down. You want it more brighter, you bring it up. But I think I like the little bit of contrast there. In this case, it looks pretty good there. And bring up the curve here. Yeah, that's good. And maybe swing this over to more color of the skin I like. Okay, which is it's pretty good. I might even boost up more color. Let's do that. There we go. And looks not bad. Let's play it now. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, now of course I can do more edit, but you can see my ISO is set to 640, and even when with the color grading, it still looked very good, as you can see here. Okay, let me stop this for a minute. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. You can see the background, there's not much noise because my ISO is quite low. Now obviously if I bring it down to 400 and 200 it will be darker, so I'll just leave it at 640, which is about right. It's not too much background noise here on the shadow. So at 640 you can bring up or play around with the color wheels and do color grading with minimal effect of the background noise. Notice that I bring up the aperture as wide as I can, 3.5 for this lens. I set my shutter speed to 1/30th. Now ideally it should be 1/50th, but since we're just doing studio setting, 1/30th is more than adequate. It's okay to do 1/30th. Don't let the other YouTubers or filmmaker tell you that 1/30th is wrong. Okay, if you're doing a studio setting, 1/30th is just fine. And you can see if I play this video, it looks okay. It doesn't look like it's ghosting or anything like that. It looks normal to my eye anyway. So if you're doing just studio setting, yes, set it to 1/30th to bring more light. But of course if you're doing short films, obviously you will set 1/50th. Now the disadvantage is that you make sure that you bring more light during your filming. Okay, so you have to hit the right light setting right there and then when you're filming. So get everything right at the beginning so you don't have to worry about editing during post. Okay, this is very important. This is one thing I learned about starting out filming, is that you got to get everything right at the beginning. When you look at that camera with your eye on the monitor, it has to be as best looking as possible. And if you want to change a little bit, you can do that in post, especially when you have a camera that's 8-bit 420. Okay, now if you are filming with a higher bit rate, like 10-bit 422 or higher with a bit rate of like 400 megabits per second or something like that, then yeah, maybe you don't have to worry too much about how you grade it. But I still think you do, but you have a little bit more flexibility. That's what I meant. Okay, so there we go, you're done. Now have a look at the before and after, before color grading and after color grading, and see which one you seem to like the best. Okay, have a look. Thanks for watching. EducateTube.com.